Good morning and a happy new year to you. I am Alero Edu, welcoming you to Sunrise, the first in 2025.
Yeah. Today is the fourth day. 2025 is 4 days old already.
Only 4 days old.
Whole 4 days.
And we haven't seen you guys since last year.
Can you imagine? You people must be old right now. A whole year. Anyway, good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makine. By the way, I've had my cup of cocoa this morning.
Have you had yours? Or did you have cocoa?
Or did you have cocoa? Whether you are high and mighty or meek and lowly, make up your mind.
Just drink something, Sha. Just drink something. Yes. So, 2025. New Year resolutions. Did you make any resolutions?
It's New Year revolution.
I don't bother making them anymore because I never keep them.
See, I think we talked about it last week.
Yeah.
Last year. We spoke about it last year.
Yeah.
Why some of those things we don't keep them. I think it's just because of motivation. And one thing that I think everyone just needs is to give yourself enough motivation, strong enough motivation to say, I'm going to do this or else. And that's just it. If you know, for instance, that without walking, you are putting your life in jeopardy. Without exercising, living a sedentary life, you're putting your life in jeopardy. Of course, you know that there'll be consequences.
I've been talking about motivation. I heard only yesterday that a niece of mine has, I think it's type 2 diabetes.
Oh, wow.
And every month she has to spend about 520,000 naira on her injections, her insulin injections. And this other cousin who was telling me he now said to her, that means that if you do not spend this money and buy these drugs every month, you are going to die. I mean, what is more motivating?
That is the solid
motivation.
Solid motivation. 500,000 naira every month.
Every month for her insulin.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me say it in Ghanaian.
Jesus, indeed. I mean, that is motivation if ever you wanted one.
So please exercise this year. If you don't have any New Year revolution, what is revolution? New Year, whatever. Do me a favor. Exercise.
No, the thing
walk.
Ayo, if you get told that if you don't walk, you will die. I promise you, you'll even walk more than you are required to.
Because, gosh, you don't know how blessed you are by just being alive, having a good health, because you take it for granted.
Yeah.
A good number of times, one of my favorite songs, that one that says, I can carry my body. The fact that you can move around.
I can carry my body.
That you can move your limbs.
Yes, you wake up in the morning, you don't have to lie in bed for 20 minutes before you can get out because there's one little ache here, there's one little twitch there. You just jump out of bed.
Your body doesn't have to boot.
Thank God.
Anyway,
God.
The year has begun on a high.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You got a pay raise?
Well, the president spoke.
Okay. He did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
even though, well, somebody said, I heard some analysts say, well, the president's job is to give people hope, and he gave us hope.
Well, should he rather not give you anything?
Well, renewed hope. So he renewed it again.
Okay. So our subscription expired in 2024.
And he's doing excuse my French, I was going to say, but I won't say it. He's doing a good job of it. A good one.
Giving
us hope.
Well, I think, okay.
And he keeps saying, be patient, guys. All these policies are going to come into fruition very soon. You will start feeling, but inflation is still at 34.7?
Well, he said it's government's going to bring it down to 15%. How that's going to happen will be a miracle. You know,
I heard Muda the other day saying, but how he's going to do it, he has not told us.
And see, he didn't tell us. We just knew that fuel price was going to rise, and it arose. Now, fuel price has begun to trickle down.
Well, they call it price slash.
No. It wasn't a slash. It's reduction. Okay.
They said it was slashed to, and the slash was only down by 59.
No, that is not a slash. That is...
Okay.
You see, it's simple English.
I don't used to understand.
That's the problem. When people don't go to school.
But I got A in English, thank you.
You got Guinea?
A.
You mean A? He said, okay, so when fuel subsidy was removed, or rather, the subsidy removal was activated, fuel prices rose astronomically.
Yeah.
But now, in fact, when Warri came on stream, Port Harcourt. Well, that's one of the things, one of the bragging statements of the president last year. In January 1. So when Port Harcourt came on stream, our correspondent went to town and found out that fuel prices came down from like 1,507 to barely 1,000.
Okay.
In a matter of whatever. So now, even all over the country, between NNPCL and Dangote refineries, fuel prices are now, on the average, below 1,000 naira.
Okay.
Now, what goes up what goes up in Nigeria never came down before. But now, it is coming down small. Now, someone called my attention to the fact that, no, it's not the first time that, fuel price was going to be reduced in Nigeria. Where I said, show me one time. He said during Yaradwa's time. He himself now came back and told me, actually, that was a presidential order to bring down the price. So it wasn't market forces. But this one is market forces.
Presidential order cannot do anything now because it is market forces.
Then there was not market forces because the subsidy was very, very active at the time. So now that things are coming down, I was at the fuel station, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? One of the guy was saying, well, I said, you guys, thank you. Fuel prices are coming. I said, yes. I said, but price of soft drink can never come down to 200 naira again.
500 naira.
I said, that one is one that is paying this work.
500 naira.
So it's and then one of the crucial things
we used to buy that thing for 10 kobo.
How many CL? 25 CL 29 CL?
29 CL.
That was ancient.
One
days.
coin would buy you a bottle of soft drink.
That was then. There was a time we bought 50 CL for 50 naira. So please, or even less. So, so one of the things that's paining me, Alero, is this food production thing. Food production.
Farmers cannot go to their farms. Security.
It is a serious...
So Alero has planted bitter leaf, she has planted scent leaf, she has planted tomato, she has planted pepper. Now, there was something I saw on YouTube the other day about planting yam. How you cut one tuber into little pieces,
yes,
rub the pieces in ash, and put it in a bag, and plant it in a bag.
Yeah.
So from one tuber of yam, you can get many tubers.
Yes. That's farming.
That's the one I'm going to try next.
Oh, no, that's farming, but you have to determine the size of the bag you're going to use.
Yeah, I know the size of the bag. And I know the price of the sand I'm going to buy and the manure. Thank you.
Okay. So, food and menu are synonymous.
Menu. The food is on the menu.
The food is on the menu. So what's on the menu this morning?
2024 in review. But of course, where do we start? The oil and gas sector, of course.
And we will not leave out, we're still in the energy department. Electricity. Access to electricity.
Oh, and this matter just doesn't want to go away. We have to find ways of fighting multidimensional poverty. 133 million
2 years
of our
ago.
200.
No, 3 years ago.
Well, more have fallen into it since the removal of subsidy.
And then lifestyle today. Healthy lifestyle tips. In this year. We have started giving you.
Don't bother to make resolutions. Just try and do a few things another way.
Just do revolution.
And then we have an artist of the week to close the show, as is usual on Sunrise. So please, as we said at the beginning, get your cocoa
or
your
cocoa
and join us. "2024 witnessed a substantial fuel price surge." Well,
among other things.
We all know that. Significantly impacting businesses and households. The oil sector witnessed relative growth and stability as oil production output hit, I think by the end of the year, it had actually hit about 1.7, even though per day, 1.7 million barrels per day, even though we still haven't met our OPEC quota. But we're crawling gradually towards it. The good news is that our output has increased. But petrol loading began at the Dangote refineries, and towards the end of the year, Port Harcourt refinery came on board, Warri refinery came on board just a few days ago. So for me, all that is good news. But I'm not the analyst. We have a panel with us this morning. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Majid Dahiru, energy security advocate, as well as columnist.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we also have Dr. Kawade Okwaifa, Executive Director, Center for Sustainable Mobility and Access Development. Good morning. And joining us virtually is the former President of Trade Union Congress, Mr. Peter Esele. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good of you to join us. Now, two refineries have come on stream, Mr. Dahiru. Our output has increased. What else? There were no fuel queues over December for the first time in many years. These are all wonderful, should I say newsies? Which for you should be number one?
I think the coming on stream of a number of refineries after many years of elusive promises is for me the number one in all of these developments. You talked about growth in the energy sector. For me, what we had in 2024 was development in the energy sector. First, the largest single train refinery in the world, which is located in Nigeria, the Dangote refinery, came on stream fully when it began to produce PMS sometime in March of 2024. And before the end of the year, two government-owned refineries that are managed by the NNPC, the Port Harcourt refinery, the Old Port Harcourt refinery, and the Warri refinery also came on stream. And what that has done is that it has added to the availability and accessibility component of energy security for Nigerians. The prices are still quite high. They are not yet at the affordability threshold of most citizens, including myself and you. However, availability was the reason why you didn't see queues during the festive period. So I think the first of many steps towards achieving energy security for Nigeria was taken firmly in 2024. And I hope that it will be sustained going into the new year and ahead.
Well, we're in the new year already.
Yes.
Dr. Kwefa, do you agree?
Yeah, I cannot.
Or
agree.
what's the topmost for you?
The topmost for me, I will reframe it, is to say is the availability of energy, not just petrol or PMS.
Okay, options.
And that is the same thing you mentioned by those three refineries coming on stream. Dangote though earlier, but fully in 2024. And I will add to it. Apart from the fact that energy is not available, the sufficiency can be guaranteed. And when you mentioned availability, for those of us in the mobility sector who would rely more on these energy sources from the oil and gas industry, it cannot be stretched further. And then you also need to also understand the audacity to take some decisions to make sure these things are possible. And that also goes to the way the government have handled the situation. Not as if all this started in 2024. It started earlier with the PIA. There was no political will to get it done. The previous administration, the Buhari administration, had the will, they got it done. There was not full will to get it fully implemented. The current government came in and audaciously put in the push to get it done. And once the PIA implementation gets increased, I mean the force was put into it, you see all things coming into play. And also note that this is going to have the most effect, not like we have seen in 2024, but as we go into 2025, we'll now start seeing how this will start impacting the transportation sector, the mobility sector, and the standard of living.
So how about the logistics sector? Because that affects not just the Dr. I selected it deliberately because you know it has a significant impact on prices of items in the country.
Yes. Okay, for the logistics sector, the key is availability of the energy source. The next will be the cost of the energy cost. And with all these competition we have seen coming up and down, and then we can now predict, we can really say the price will be in this range. Now, not that before when you can see the price. So for the logistics sector, this is a big boost. Now we are sure of availability, we are sure of options, then we are also sure of diversification. Don't forget, you're talking of petroleum. The gas sector there was high gas commercialization.
We're definitely coming to the gas sector.
So for the logistics sector, there are now energy diversification, there are now options, and the sector can sit down and say, in the next 2-3 months, I need to do this, and this will likely be the cost, because now the cost is more stable, even though there will be fluctuations up and down, but we have seen that the possibility of competition stabilizing the price, and the possibility of competition bringing down the price also is there. And so for us in the logistics sector, this is one of the things we've been looking for.
Okay.
Mr. Saleh, some have criticized the amount of money used to revamp these refineries. I mean, it costs, I can confidently say an arm and a leg, and they say that all that money could have been used building another, more modern refinery. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, sometimes we are, in this part of the world, we are so used to hearing bad news that when good news comes up, we also begin to question good news. So, first thing is, it's about $2 billion that was borrowed for this refineries rehabilitation, thereabout. And if you say, go and ask Dangote the cost of him building his refinery, it cost Dangote more than $20 billion to have his refinery built. But one of my big takeaway from all of this is that first, there is competition in the system. And secondly, citizens are also now beginning to also believe government, because I listened to your studio comments before we came on board, where you were talking about at least we now have availability, there is no scarcity. And then your colleague was talking about the various prices in time yaw. But what we have now is going forward is we are going to have NNPC that knows that it has to perform or it will lose its market share. And then you have a behemoth like Dangote refinery that is also on stream. So I'm looking at it that we are better off having all these refineries, one from the government, which is 100% public owned, and the other private sector. And what the government, NNPC, for example, is going to do, if you ask me why I am happy that NNPC is on stream, is that government has control over whatever NNPC is doing. You don't have control over what Dangote refinery is going to do because Dangote has debt to pay. So that too is something we must be open to and not go ahead and think that we should have our energy security entirely in the private sector.
Well, that's one sore point that it would seem like we're still handling, Mr. Sele, because we can't ignore the fact that the conversations between the NNPCL as a private sector operator and a competitive operator, a competition to other people, other practitioners in the sector, as well as a government-owned facility and a former regulator, so to speak. And then the conversations going on between them and Dangote refineries in particular is something. So what's my question is based on the fact that those conversations have had an impact on perception and prices eventually. Do you see that tapering down? Do you see us coasting now, or you think maybe we can still have some other issues come up in the course of this new year?
Yes, we are still going to have some other issues come up in the course of the new year. But the most important thing is that there is nothing wrong in having conversations along the line. There's nothing wrong in having disagreement. Over a period of time, water will find its level. There are laws. Now you have a regulator. NNPC is no longer a regulator in that sector. So what you have is that, yes, NNPC and Dangote will go back and forth. But once the two refineries come off, Dangote, NNPC will be leaving millions of barrels of crude. So it's very... when we did a review, I think on this same show, we did a review on this same energy sector looking into 2024. And what I told you on that show was that I don't think NNPC can meet their deadline, but I'm very sure the refinery was going to come on stream. And the reason why I said that was because of how the funds for rehabilitation of those refineries were sourced. They were sourced from Exim, and Exim don't release money except you meet the various milestones. So I had that confidence. And then number two is that you also have the GMD of NNPC. I think he would have been so embarrassed himself every time meeting his timeline. But at the end of the day, he knows he had to perform. And gladly, he has performed and delivered on those refineries. So looking into 2025, what are the prognosis for 2025? Yes, it's looking good. It's better than what we had in 2024. First, refineries are on. Dangote is on. NNPC is on. It's possible BOA will come on later in the year. Competition will be on. And then the average price right now is a little less than 1,000 naira. And don't also forget that if you have price hike in international crude oil price, you are going to pay more at the pump stations.
You just raised an issue, Mr. Sele, and I'm going to bring it to Mr. Dahiru here, and maybe Mr. Okwe if I want to speak to it eventually. And that's the fact that, so now, you just said it, BOA will come on stream, hopefully, and I think the NNPCL is also working on Kaduna, and the second wing of the Port Harcourt refineries, which, of course, cumulatively will probably give us something on the average of about 450,000 barrels per day. That's from the government. Dangote refinery, 650,000 barrels per day. That's more than 1 million already. Yes. Barrels of crude per day. BOA is coming up with 250,000 barrels per day. If the federal government has to supply all of those in 1 month per day, on the average now we are making about 1.7 barrels. Thank you, 1.7 million barrels per day. If we have to sell, or rather hand this to these local refineries, 1.2 on the average barrels per day, where is the federal government going to get forex from?
Okay, first, it's important to note that if the government is going to sell crude to local refineries, it's going to sell in dollars as well. No, it's in dollars.
They said that they
No,
are going
but
to be
that is
naira for
That's a
crude.
peculiar arrangement between the government and Dangote.
And Dangote, okay.
The PIA has internationalized our local oil and gas industry, particularly when it comes to upstream, midstream, and downstream. So everything is internationalized. So you are buying crude from NNPC at the rate that is quoted internationally. But be that as it may, it should not change the government in any way. But government has obligations towards some of its clients that, for the sales agreements have been reached and all that. However, I think what you're trying to ask is adequacy of supply to local refineries. The truth is there's no country
at the same time
unable to export.
Yes.
Now, you see, there's no country that I know of in the world, not Saudi Arabia, not United States of America, not Russia, that relies solely on locally produced crude for its refineries.
Okay.
There must be importation of crude to service local refineries, as well as exportation of crude to bring in foreign exchange. It was interesting to know that Saudi Arabia is a major producer of crude oil. Saudi has the capacity to produce 12 million barrels per day, even though it does 10 now.
Wow.
Yes. But Saudi still imports crude oil, including from Nigeria, that is struggling to meet up a quota.
This is oil politics, right?
It's called oil dynamics. Because, you see, energy security entails supply must exceed demand at all times. So you must show up your supply needs by keeping supply chains open, both from local and foreign sources.
Okay.
America, for instance, is also a major producer of oil. America produces as much as between 8.5 and 10 million barrels of crude per day. But America imports almost the same quantity of crude into its jurisdiction. In fact, to make matters worse, America has 132 refineries functioning as at this morning. America is a major exporter of refined products. America also imports refined petroleum into this country. Saudi Arabia, for example, is the fourth largest exporter of refined petroleum. The fourth most imported item into Saudi Arabia is refined petroleum. So there will always be import and export of crude. So the controversy surrounding NNPC and Dangote over crude supply, ordinarily shouldn't have arisen in the first place. If the promoters of Dangote refinery and other refineries understand that, you have to secure your source of crude from anywhere in the world because it is still the same price. You're going to pay in dollars. So that there will not be a conflict if you have even more refineries. While Nigeria is still trying to ramp up production, for me, Nigeria should produce anywhere between 5 and 7 million barrels of crude per day for our population of 200 million people. That should be the minimum we should do as a country. So I'm sure all hands are on deck to ramp up production. What that is being done, if you have a refinery in Nigeria, source for crude anywhere you can get it. There's nothing unhealthy about it. It is part of the dynamics of international oil marketing and trading.
Despite the agreement with Dangote, Dangote is even importing crude, isn't it?
That's what I'm saying.
To meet its requirements.
It is essential for him to import. He cannot rely solely on the local market. Now you have countries, for instance, with refineries that do not produce crude at all. South Korea, for example.
Singapore.
India.
That's all they do in Singapore.
But they don't have crude oil. But
they don't have
import
crude.
all of their crude oil, but they have refineries abound in this country. And they're more competitive than even some of our oil-producing countries in Africa. So it doesn't matter whether you import crude or not. It's part of the template, the pricing, and supply chain mechanism of the oil and gas industry internationally.
So, Mr. Kwefa, our budget is predicated on, the outlook is 2 million barrels per day. We're now doing 1.7. So you could say that we're approaching 2 million gradually. Without dealing with oil theft and insecurity and all the things, degradation in the area, so it leads to unrest happening in the oil-producing areas, how do you think we're going to achieve this 2 million? Where he is saying that we even need about 8 million.
But let me say once again that I totally agree with Mr. Majid Tairo that Nigeria needs more than 2 billion barrels per day, and we can do that. And if you take oil theft out, I think we are currently at above 2 billion. Now I take you back
million.
Sorry. barrels per day.
Yes.
If you go back to between 2016 to 2019, you recall when the federal government moved into the creek to discuss with the Kriegers. And we went as far as 2.0 or 1.9 million barrels per day. And what that tells us is that oil depth is a critical part. And if you look at what has been happening since towards the end of 2023 to now, while the major IOCs are divesting from the onshore, you see the Nigerian companies are taking it up. So they will be in a better place to manage the security challenges around that area. So we are expected to see more production. Also, in the last 12 months, the Nigerian government have also reactivated marginal fields that are hitherto not producing, like 13, OML 13, 18, 27 or 29. They've come back on stream in the Akpo area, Madu area. So you see all those onshore marginal fields they are now coming back to stream. Then you see local capacity to technology transfer to local companies like SNEPCO and the rest of them. They are taking over those areas. And you see the recently signed agreement with Shell on the Bonga field. So you will see all those IOCs doing much more prospecting on the offshore. So I have no doubt. Now that we have, like I said, we will continue to, Dangote will have to import. Yeah. He can't rely on Nigerian crude. Nigerian crude is too sweet. He needs a blend with WTI for his own profitability. So that's why the argument, I said it here before, that there was no reason to argue. It's just, everybody is just trying to protect his own territory. Okay. So I have no doubt that really we will surpass that 2 billion. And also note that we now have a regulator in the downstream, NMDPRA, they're doing fine. You have a regulator in the upstream, that is NUPRC, they're doing fine. And the NUPRC has made this projection. NMDPRA has made a projection based on demands from these refineries to NUPRC. And NUPRC had come out to say they are in position to meet the requirements. So with these PRA agencies, regulators that are in place, with NNPC, Dangote, Bua, whoever are they, and all these other Aradel, Waltersmiths, and the remaining modular refineries, who are the operators? NNPC is now an operator, just like Dangote. Okay. Everybody will sit tight, competition will set in. And they also will now be going to prospect for crude, because the secret to this thing is that as a refinery, you should have your own feedstock exclusively to you so that you don't run short. The whole world is looking for crude, and don't forget, Nigerian crude is the sweetest. And
okay. I don't know what honey you people put into it.
Bonny light.
Let me ask Mr. Sele. Now, there's something that Dr. Kwefe just mentioned now about PIA and then the local communities from Alero's question. This whole oil theft thing. The PIA makes some provisions. How do you see us enforcing those provisions in a way that the host communities, the people through whose communities these pipelines pass across, run through, can actually take responsibility? Knowing that the cost of stealing crude is not cheap. It's not like you just go into a shop and just break the glass and take it. You have to it's costly to steal crude. Consequently, it's a high-end thievery, if I can use the word.
I think you actually even answered the question, because you used the word high-end. And how do you expect the host community to be able to deliver those high-end technology for stealing crude? So one thing is very clear. I think for the government to be able to achieve its aim, I think the Chief of Defense Staff, it has to come from the various security agencies. You cannot steal, I would say it categorically, you cannot steal a barrel of crude confidently and comfortably without the of the various security agencies. What the host communities are doing, it's like somebody going to take a jerry can and fetch 25 liters or 30 liters. The real players steal 200,000, 300,000 barrels of crude daily. And then the real players have a ship waiting. Because, of course, you and I know that for any ship to come into the country, berth, and move crude out, there must be certain collusion between the various security agencies for that to happen.
Yep.
When we keep emphasizing host community is just a tip of the iceberg. We need to go after the major players who are behind it. Luckily, NNPC is applying a lot of technology now. In NNPC, they have their control room, which makes it easier for them to look at what is happening. Even as big as Saudi Arabia with its laws and very punishing way of dealing with stuff like that, Saudi Arabia has a technology where it can view the entire pipeline, whatever comes in, whatever goes out. So we need to apply technology to check all of this. And then the president in his media chat, the president alluded to the fact that you just don't go ahead and say you want to fight corruption. You just have to put things in place to make sure nobody will dare go to that direction. So first is ensure that your military, your security agencies are disciplined, and those who are behind it are brought to book. Once you are able to do that, host community will naturally fall in line, because in the PIA, the host community has a lot of benefit if something of such is not happening. So please, let's put our attention on the major players in that sector who are responsible by commission or omission in
are you then saying that the PIA is just papering over cracks, knowing that that same law prescribes some kind of disadvantage to any community where from oil stealing happens?
We even have laws that ensures that if you steal crude, there are laws that will give you appropriate sanction for that. So what the PIA is trying to do is also trying to look at the host community and look for a way to kind of frighten people there. But at the end of the day, I don't think, from my own experience, host community are not really major players in the game. The major player, we all know those who are. We know just that people sometimes don't want to talk about it. But the NNPC, for what they've been doing, and some arm of the security agencies recently, they've been able to, because of the spotlight. I think channels also get credit for that. They did a series of investigation, and they went to the various creeks and really shone light on it, on how crude oil theft is being carried out in the country. And you and I are also aware that a shipload of crude was actually set ablaze. And on this channel, we also started asking questions, why do that? So when you don't bring anybody to book, then that invariably means that you are encouraging the theft to go on.
Yes.
Those who are behind crude oil theft, we've not heard of anyone that has been prosecuted. We've only heard of ships that have been burnt. So if you want a change in any society, if you do the crime, you must do the time.
Of course, of course. Mr. Dairu, we can't talk about this without talking about the aging infrastructure and the divestment of some of the IOCs. How do we attract investment? Because this whole sector seems to be coming up again. So how do we attract investment into that sector so that all this we're talking about will come into fruition?
Okay, yes, I think in the outgone years, maybe because the president himself, President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, has some background in oil and gas industry as a former treasurer of a major oil company in Nigeria. And he also appointed the Minister of Petroleum, who is a lawyer. And this is the post-PIA era. So you need somebody who has legal, background with a grasp of the commercial side of oil and gas industry and a competent team to the NNPC, working together as one government. I think they've been able to clear a lot of hurdles in the area of investment, from administrative issues to legal issues and to issues that have to do with the art of deal making. So the president's trips across the world has yielded some results. And what we need to do is to sustain that spirit of a government now acting as a businessman and not just as a political entity. And so what we've seen is that the first time in 12 years, we've seen inflow of investments into Nigeria like never before. And that is why the prospect of ramping up production beyond or above the current 1.7 million barrels per day is quite very, very bright. As we speak, Shell has agreed to return to Nigeria, and they are dedicating a quarter of their 2025 investment to Nigerian market. We've also seen a lot of other companies coming. ENI is coming to actually kickstart production in the OPA 245. As soon as the legal conundrum around that issue is cleared and efforts are underway, that will bring in about $20 billion of investment. So we're already seeing movement in this direction because you have the president, like I said, the Minister of Petroleum, Oil, Lopobri, the GMD of NNPC, Melekiara, and other stakeholders working as one government. They are clearly the whole. So the president sits down and asks critical questions. Why are we not having enough investment? And they tell him, and immediately uses instruments, executive instruments, to clear the way because he's hands-on. And this is one aspect you can give him credit. You know, people like God that criticize him a lot. We find this aspect of his administration quite ingenious. And
so you like the deal-making part?
I believe government is a business. I believe that government has business doing business. And any government that cannot do business has no business being in government. And I'm excited that...
I think that's a quotable quote. You need to say it again.
I believe that government has business doing business. Okay. And that the only business of government is to do business. And any government that cannot do business has no business being in government.
Okay.
And that is why I'm excited that the NNPC under this administration has been able to revive 2 of its refineries. And I'll take the implication of that. Beyond energy security, it is revenue. Exports of LPFO and other base products from the Port Harcourt refinery has been hitting the international market. So meaning beyond crude exports, Nigeria now has a diversified source of sustainable foreign exchange from the products that will be exported from our refineries that comes into government coffers. Now this is the difference. The Nigerian people, you and I, own NNPC through the Ministry of Finance Incorporated and Ministry of Petroleum Incorporated. It's our company. So at the end of the year, the activities of their refinery production activities will come into our foundation account as dividends, in addition to payment of royalties and taxes into the same foundation account by the same company. So we are expecting the NNPC to declare a fatter dividend at the end of 2025 because of the operations and the export activity taking place in Port Harcourt and Warri as we speak. That is one way to raise revenue away from taxation and to grow the wealth of nations.
There's something that Mr. Sele said the other time, and I'd like you to speak to it, that competition will always happen. In fact, in responding to Alero's question, he said, look, we have gotten so used to bad news that when good news comes, we question it. Now, the bad press that the NNPCL has gotten over the years, how do you see it? First of all, does it have any value? And then, how do you see the NNPC itself reversing that bad press?
By simply performing. I mean, the time they told us that Port Harcourt refinery has come on stream, people expected that after about a week or so of functionality, we'll have heard that it has gone moribund again. It is still producing as at this morning and distributing products locally and internationally. In fact, the reduction in price you saw in the price of PMS was because of the competitive edge that the NNPC brought into the market. That first price is now what's a little. So it is still working about 2 months plus after that announcement was made. Again, nobody told us when the refinery was going to come up. There was no timeline set. And suddenly we heard that it has started working. Again, if one refinery is sustained over time and it works and it comes on stream 100% and it doesn't go moribund again, it means trust and integrity will have been established between the Nigerian people and the management of their company. See, this is our company. And for those who think that government has no business in the energy sector, that is the greatest disservice you can do to the Nigerian people. Energy cannot be left, like Dr. Sele said, energy management cannot be left in the hands of private individuals alone because energy is a matter of national security. And you know why? Energy is the oxygen of economic productivity, without which economies die. And that is why we hear that government has a responsibility of security and welfare. That security includes energy security. And that is why an oil producing country like Nigeria must have its government maintain presence in the midst of production in energy products and services. Because it has a responsibility to guarantee you availability, accessibility, and affordability of energy sources and products. Dangote refineries and any other private refinery does not have such obligations towards you as a citizen. So Dangote can start to close shop today, sell off his refinery, and invest in real estate. Yeah. Where does that live in Nigeria? But government has a responsibility. And that is why even the headquarters of capitalism today, which is America may not have a national oil company. but it has a strategic petroleum reserve that it uses to regulate the sector to ensure supplies, availability, affordability, and accessibility.
Okay. Dr. The competition, if you look in your, what's that glass that they usually look into?
Crystal ball.
If you look into your crystal ball, what's your outlook, particularly of market prices in the year 2025? I'm asking that against the backdrop again of logistics.
I'm asking you to be a wizard.
As I said, crystal ball. Because a good number of people, in the sector have told us that the price of products are sometimes largely dependent on logistics, movements from place to place all over the country. So if you would look into that crystal ball, how do you see price trajectory for Nigeria?
One, international pricing will affect the price of crude and the cost of energy. However, looking at that, there is also in place the gas commercialization project. Because even though gas is also internationally priced, it is locally produced in excess. So there is much emphasis now in using gas in the logistics and supply chain sector. That's why you see the auto gas is coming up. You see also use of electric vehicles, not just for vehicles of cars, even in aviation they're working so hard on it. The same thing in the shipping, maritime sector. You have so many aspects of the maritime. When you see a ship, it's using diesel, heavy oils and the rest, but there are some part of it, when it gets to the harbor, it shuts down and switches to alternate energy sources because those ones are cheaper on the long run. So in the logistics area, the emphasis now is to also, because of the net zero carbon emission, is to move towards a cheaper energy source, which is also coming from another product from this crude oil refining and also from natural gas. So the logistics sector is moving towards natural gas. And that is why you see government is promoting the CNG initiative, not just for mobility, it's also for production. If you go along this corridor now, this is the Lagos-Ibadan axis. Most, if not all, the major manufacturers on this axis are using CNG to power the factory. So while the competition goes on in the petroleum sector, you will see that the logistics sector has looked far ahead. We are now at about 100 vehicles converted. Ogun State has converted all its commercial buses. Lagos State is planning to bring in about 2,000 CNG buses. Government, during this Christmas, a lot of people took CNG. So you will see the prices of logistics, prices, cost of mobility also will come down because the energy sector is now undergoing serious reform. And that reform is not just in the petroleum or in the crude sector, it's also in the gas commercialization sector. You've seen the Nigerian government through NNPC have ramped up the gas expansion project. Recently, I think NMDPR also gave about, is it 120 billion to 6 local companies for the gas infrastructure expansion project. So for people in the logistics sector, it's a win-win. You have options of petrol, you have option of gas, then you have option of electric or then the Ministry of Steel is also putting so much effort on this lithium and lithium exploration and processing in Nigeria. So for us, if you can reduce the cost of mobility, the cost of goods will come down. The standard of living will also come down.
We understand that this CNG thing, that CNG trucks are queuing up in this Magboro area, and they're causing, is it that there's a shortage of gas or what?
Okay.
Are you aware of that?
Yeah, not only in Magboro, it's also happening in Abuja, and they are mostly, I don't want to mention the company.
It's one particular company.
One particular company.
Okay.
Actually, there is no gainsaying or denying the fact that there is infrastructure challenge in the
because we don't have enough
CNG.
yet.
Because the rate of adoption of CNG is moving so fast beyond the expectation.
Okay.
And that is why I think NNPC has the responsibility to also create virtual gas stations now. So for areas where you don't have the gas pipeline, the issue is that for CNG, you have to create mother stations along where you have gas pipeline. From the mother station, you create the skids that you take to those stations that power. So the gas expansion project is going on. That's why I said the 120 billion stuff was done recently to about 6 companies to increase the infrastructure. It's an infrastructure issue, and it's been challenged. But it's also a testament to the fact that Nigerians are adopting that technology, especially in the logistics. This Christmas, can you imagine NURT, NATO, and there was the other one, Ritian, using CNG buses to bring down, and you know what that does? Those who are using petrol or diesel, once they see that the thing can go for 3,500 and their whole price is 30,000, they also quickly adjusted their price.
True.
So that's the logic.
No one's complaining about price of transportation.
This time, because the CNG, as little as the injection of the, there was this CI conversion incentive program where the commercial buses have 100% conversion cost.
Anyway,
and all those things are brought. So you're going to see more adoption. But what one should advise those big companies that for haulage companies, they should try to establish their own fueling points so that they don't have to compete with
but then you guys should also ramp up, because we need more gas infrastructure, the CNG points where people can get these things. Otherwise, I don't know how long that people will be able to keep up with that. But still on gas, let me ask Mr. Sele. Dr. Okwefa has said that we now have multiple energy options, and of course it's a good thing for everyone. But one of the grouses that the electricity sector of the energy industry has had with the energy sector generally is the availability of gas for electricity. And we hear all kinds of things, that is because gas is not available, that we're unable to produce, and
we're selling at international prices.
We're selling, all kinds of things. So, what do we need to streamline, Mr. Sele, to ensure that we don't hear of another 12 national grid collapses in 2025, and that energy supply is constant and consistent, hopefully through gas supply?
Now, when we talk about privatization of electricity, first it started with privatization. You see, one of the things that we do is that we treat symptoms. Our attention is always paid to the symptom. We don't treat the causes. What's the foundation of the challenges we're having in that electricity sector? I was also president at that time when they privatized NEPA. Now, what you have is that those who acquired the various electricity infrastructure, did not invest any money. What they did initially was to promise the government that they were going to invest XYZ amount, and at the end of the day, they went in there and borrowed money from Nigerian banks instead of bringing money from overseas. So what you have now is that the government is in a catch-22 position. Because if the government move now to take it over from them with the total indebtedness that they are to the banks, that may also lead to a lot of failures from the bank. So what are the alternatives? One of the major alternatives is that government must seek out a way of how to take it back, because government is still major funders of that sector. You imagine how much billions of naira that government is spending to make sure that meters are provided. It has been privatized. It's not government responsibility to privatize that. It's like going to some of these telecoms and ask them that, we don't have network because there is no supply of diesel. It's none of our business. You have to make it available. You have to invest in how you will source your feed. So at the end of the day, they will give us all manner of excuses, but that's a private sector driven area. And that's one of my challenges that I'm worried that may come up in the oil and gas. NNPC is back on now, and I'm going to tell you something that I think that is likely going to play out. Now that refineries are functional, you are going to have private sector players, powerful people in politics, in business, who will now want to tell us that we need to privatize that same refineries now? And once you have that challenge, because one thing we must know is that private entities don't really care. The first priority of a private man, of a private business, is this profit.
Sure.
Okay.
So we must be able.
Mr. Tayo, this gas matter
Yes, ma'am.
and power
Yeah.
is it's a very serious matter.
It is.
Because we understand, because my estate, for instance, runs on an IPP. We don't depend on the national grid
National
at
grid,
all.
yes.
So whether the grid runs down 30 times a year, we don't even notice because we have power most of the time because we're powered by gas from an IPP. But the issue is that in signing the agreement, we were told that gas is sold in dollars. Our gas produced here is sold to us in dollars.
Yeah.
Should the government not make concessions to companies within Nigeria who intend to generate power, for use by Nigerians?
No, they should. In fact, there are some aspects of the PI that I'm not in agreement with. In the attempt to internationalize local energy markets by implication dollarizing it, is something that I find inimical to national development. And I do not find a parallel anywhere in the world where such things happen. I do not think that should be the case. I do not think, for instance, that Nigerian refineries should buy crude in dollars or at the rate of international market prices. I do not think so.
But why does that happen? Because you talked about it the other time.
Yes.
And you say
again,
that arrangement is exclusive just to Nigeria.
Government. You see, those that are the policy makers are guided by the extreme neoliberal, conservative economic thinking that negates real national development that has a lot of social components. And that's a problem, really. And that is why the Obasanjo years created out of Nigeria the richest man in Africa, as well as the poorest people in Africa or in the world. It's a paradox of some sort.
Paradox.
So government must always maintain presence in critical sectors such as the energy sector. And this brings us to that important question. Most of us in the media have been bamboozled to believe that the concept of subsidy is an economic vice, which ordinarily is a virtue. What am I saying in essence? There is nothing wrong with government subsidizing energy. If there's anything government should subsidize, it is energy, next to food. So concessions in this nature can come under a comprehensive subsidy regime that targets energy, because what energy is to the economy is what oxygen is to the living thing.
Yeah.
And God in His infinite mercy has given us air to breathe free of charge. Otherwise, if there's a price tag on the air we breathe, I doubt if anybody will live beyond infancy or beyond the day you are born. So that is how economies survive on affordable energy. Where it is not free, it has to be affordable. And so government has a responsibility in this regard. I'm sure I'm one of those, for example, who oppose the board of subsidy on petroleum products. And I've been advocating for its return. And now, but that is by the way. But for me, the comprehensive way out of this logjam, electricity logjam, is to diversify sources of power generation, distribution, and transmission. And already we have a legal framework that has provided a pathway towards this direction. And that's the Electricity Act of 2023 that has come into effect with this administration. We should begin to ask state governments. A state like Sokoto, for instance, does not need gas to generate electricity in Sokoto. It has abundance of sunshine and wind.
Solar.
So what is the Sokoto state government doing in respect to putting in place investments as well as legal framework to power that jurisdiction?
Anyway,
what are they doing?
We're having an electricity conversation
Immediately after this.
So this responsibility should now be transferred to the state.
We get
So
that.
you agree that there should be concessions?
Oh, definitely. Electricity should even be subsidized for individuals to use. That is the level of concessions I think should be given to energy consumers. Okay. I don't even say it for starters.
Okay.
Please, this focus should not be on the states.
Okay.
What are you doing individually to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity?
Let the guests in the second segment answer that question. But there is a question for me that I want
we need to
ask.
talk about the other gas quickly. The cooking gas.
Oh. There are no women on this panel, in case you haven't noticed.
No, the men don't eat. No, the men don't eat.
Well, the question I would like to ask you is this new maybe I should take it to Mr. Sele, actually. This new conversation, you remember the oil discovery, so to speak, in the north. How far, so far with that, in your own opinion? What are the logjams? We had a conversation with the governor of Bauchi State, and he says he's been having a tough time having some kind of agreement to discuss modalities for making progress with certain federal agencies. What's your understanding of what's happening?
You just said how far, so far, and I'll tell you, it's so far. Because it's so far, because if the governor is telling you that he's having issues with, government agencies are not going to come and tell the governor what it is. If NNPC struck an oil well that is of commercial value, commercial quantity, of course you are not going to tell NNPC or the oil majors to go, let's come and sign an agreement. No, they would. Nobody sees, no ant sees a sugar and walk away. So when you have issues like that, it means that they've not been able. What they are saying is just pittance. It's not there for them to have a commercial quantity that they think is worthy of the $1 billion investment that is required.
All right. Well, Mr. Okwepa,
well, we have
Alero asked you about cooking gas.
That's another kind of gas, but it's also useful in Nigeria, and it's gone up by how many hundreds of,
I think it all has to do with production. We need to produce more, and this program is also another one that is good news that a lot of people don't even pay attention to, and it's at the level of infrastructure expansion and upgrade. The AKK pipeline, the OB3 commissioned recently, the ANOH, ANOL, and all those ones, they are all geared towards making gas more affordable.
Available and affordable.
Affordable. The issue with cooking gas is there's a lot of international demand, and the demand and supply equilibrium is affecting the local consumption. When all these gas commercialization projects goes beyond the infrastructure expansion level, and we can have pipelines all over, and people also invest, which is also ongoing. People invest in the making the gas either compressed for CNG or liquefied, and don't forget, it's not the same sources. There is natural gas. There is what they call the fossil gas. So for it has to do with the international competition. For the purpose of your own estate powering, the availability is getting more, because what you have now is that when they constructed many of these power stations under Obasanjo, they were constructed where there are no gas pipelines.
Yeah.
That was another fault.
Okay.
But now pipelines have gone to most of those places.
Okay.
And you are now having the gas processing plants in Imo, in Delta. So more gases are now going to be affordable. And when the international price changes, you are talking of dollar. It's because the dollar rate is fluctuating.
Yeah.
Once it becomes stabilized, you may not feel it much. And if, like I said, the exporting of crude product, the exporting of refined product, the exporting of our gas comes in, we'll have more reserves, then we can also fight the cost of naira to dollar.
Okay.
So who knows, maybe tomorrow, the naira will keep appreciating against the dollar.
That's what we
Amen.
want. And we told you to look at the crystal ball. Maybe that's what he's saying.
Maybe that's what he's saying. Huh? Dr. Kayode Okweriva, Executive Director, Center for Sustainable Mobility and Access Development, who was with us in the studio, as well as Mr. Majid Dahiru, Energy Security Advocate and a columnist. And Mr. Peter Esele, former President, Trade Union Congress, TUC, who joined us virtually from Lekki in Lagos. Thank you very much for a very wonderful discussion on the matter of Nigeria's oil and gas in 2024.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Sunrise will return in just a moment, and we'll be looking at 2024 and electricity in Nigeria.
Thank you for staying with us. North, south, east, west. The country's power sector faced unprecedented challenges in the year gone by. Staggering 12 national grid collapses and 128 transmission towers destroyed in the course of the year by November last year. Now, the incident occurred 3 times a week, crippled power supply across the country, exposing the vulnerabilities in our nation's power grid. And of course, some of us will recall what the Minister for Power said was the cause. And we understand that the minister said it's all due to vandalism. Despite an installed capacity of 13,000 megawatts, Nigeria's power grid transmits on the average 4,000 megawatts due to aging infrastructure in a country where we need electricity supply in quite a lot more than we have right now. Let's have conversations around this, review the access to electricity parameters of Nigeria in the year 2024 and look forward with Mr. Abubakar Umar, who is an electricity consultant joining us from Yola, as well as Dr. Ayodele Oni, who is an energy policy expert. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much for having us.
Let me begin with you, Mr. Umar. If you look back, or rather, when you look back into the year 2024, what would be your assessment of how we operated as a nation, particularly in the electricity sector of the energy industry?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Good morning and Happy New Year. When we look at the 2024 year, so much has happened. There are a lot of changes from the economic point across the entire value chain. When you look at on the generation aspect segment, you realize that we have Zungeru, which is a hydro dam that comes on stream, and then but the total generation has remained, stable, not necessarily with a significant increase. And then when you look at the transmission in last year, you will see that so much has happened. There are a lot of grid collapses. There is so much, vandalism that happens in the last year, which triggered a lot of collapse. And then also TCN have installed some various transformers across the country, and they are also undergoing the process of unbundling, into ISO and then TSP. So these are all things that happens. And then the most important aspect which relates to people, when you look at the distribution value chain, that's where a lot of changes and a lot of development has been ongoing. When we start around April, when the government has increased the electricity tariff by more than 200%, at that time, there is so much issue, which is also, we know that is caused by the currency devaluation. And then when you look at different programs introduced in 2024, although some are still undergoing, for instance, the presidential metering initiative, which is now and trying to actualize in this current year. And then when you look at the DISREP program that, has been approved recently around this November, December, which is meant to be implemented also this year. And then when you look at the acquisition of some discos, we are also informed that Kaduna and Eko are undergoing some kind of, acquisition by some investors. So there are a lot of, changes in the value chain. And then when you look at the regulatory angle, which is the regulator themselves, there has been a lot of regulatory orders issuance to states to take over the regulatory aspect of their industry. I think currently now we have 9 states which also are taking over, their regulatory oversight. And then there is also the need of bilateral. So when we look at it, I will say there has been a very busy year, considering the fact that so many changes has happened. There are so much updates. The regulator is trying to shift the burden of, electricity to decentralize to the states. And then a lot of other things. So I will say in a summary, say the performance is fair. It's not as we expect, but at least it's fair. I will give it a fair performance assessment.
How about the cost of it? Cost of electricity, either for domestic use or even for small businesses?
Yeah, on this issue, of course, currently now in this country, I think 80% of the problem we are facing can be traced back to currency devaluation. So in as much as the cost is high, the problem is that when you look at one side, it's a necessity. This cost must be adjusted for that sector to be sustainable. But when you look at the other side of consumers, you realize that their income is not commensurate to the cost that is, has been rise significantly. So I will say that on the other side of electricity, they have done what they can do. It remains the government side to adjust on the income of consumers. I'm aware that 70,000 minimum wage was approved, but then a question of is it enough? That's something that is debatable. But then every other aspect of cost, in this country, not only electricity, we can see the fuel price, we can even see the telecoms, agitating for an increase in price. So everything can be traced back to the currency devaluation. And I think the earlier we accept that, the better for us. Let us try to work to make sure that the government increase our income to afford. I think we should have this discussion toward affording it rather than to focus on reducing the cost to a level that I think it is no longer sustainable.
Mr. Oni, we have often said in Nigeria that with constant power, a lot of things will fall into place in Nigeria, especially in the area of business. Small businesses would thrive. And there has been an amendment to the Constitution which says that states can generate and distribute their own power. Are you seeing any movement in this area? Are the states making any movement towards generating power and making their economies what they should be?
Okay, thank you very much. I think, properly said, I think the Constitution allows states to take over regulating and making laws with respect to generation, transmission, and distribution. Now, the issue is whether they can make investing in their states investment friendly, whether they can make generation activities investment friendly. That said, by virtue of the Electricity Act, states are supposed to the extent there's no obligation, that's the first thing we need to note. And that's the beauty of federalism, you understand. So states can take over, and up to 14 states have started that process. Not many of them are finished. It's a process, it's at least you'll be looking at least 6 months to finish from when you notify the federal regulator that you want to take over. So a number of states are. Very recently, I'm sure you heard about Lagos State and the fanfare around that. And you've got Imo, you've got Ondo, Ekiti. So they are. In fact, my own postulation is that in a few years, it will be a campaign point whether a state has sufficient power, reasonably affordable, because there's always a debate between access and price. I think that some states are beginning to take that step. But in a federal system of government, not all states need to do that, to be honest. If you can't afford it, if you don't think your state is investment friendly yet, or has the financial capacity, because taking over the electricity sector or market goes beyond generation, goes beyond providing irrevocable standing payment orders, which state governors have done to support certain power projects in their states. It's a whole gamut, because we begin to now talk about a wholesale and a retail market, a national wholesale and a retail market, particularly for states. So states are already doing that. About 14 of them are taking at one stage or the other. But it will take time. It will be a steep learning curve, to be honest. It will take time. But I do not also think all of them will succeed. I think some will and some will fail. But yes, steps are already being taken.
I find it comical, a little funny actually, and maybe not funny, that you have already seen a campaign value in electricity production. Well, there is something that we've heard that the minister has also said concerning the grid collapses. It's a vexed issue. It's as annoying as it comes, as frustrating for Nigerians. Almost like if the federal government were to say, oh, there will be electricity for 24 hours in the first 2-3 months of the year, everyone would disbelieve, like they disbelieved, the NNPC over time. But the minister has alleged that vandalism it played a significant role in the issue of the grid collapses. 128 transmission towers were destabilized, were destroyed, were vandalized in the course of the year, and which further destabilized power supply. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree that that's part of the problem, to be honest. It's multi-faceted. It's not just that. Also, you've got poor quality of infrastructure over time. For example, I'll give you a simple example. If you look at the southeast, almost all of the southeast and a large, northeast and a large portion of the northwest use radial single circuit lines, transmission line, such that if there's a disturbance in the northeast, for example, in one portion, almost all of the northeast goes off, and much of the northwest too. So over time, these should have been made triangular. So it's poor planning several years, and I do not necessarily speak about this administration. An example, between 1987 until when we started the privatization, there had been no major upgrade to the transmission system. Imagine that, what the population was in 1987 and what it was about 2010, 2013, 2017, when we started to do some work on our transmission network. So yes, it's partly correct, but I also think that if you have an emergency management system, the SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition, which is now being put in place, then some of those would not have occurred, particularly those that were incessant. There was a period it happened, it was resolved, it happened again within 24 hours, and then another 72 hours. If you average it out, that would be one grid collapse every month at the minimum, because we had at least 12, partial or total. So I think it's a potpourri of issues, but he's quite right about the role vandalism plays. And his suggestion that it should be death penalty, I think that's a bit tough.
But couldn't the federal government or anyone have seen this coming? This infrastructure were not in space, and they were not invisible. Everyone could see them. So if there was vandalism that was going to take place, some people would see them. So isn't it possible to have foreseen that these things would happen? Telcos had that problem for a while, and somehow we don't hear much of it anymore. Even if it still exists, it's not as significant as it was in time past. So shouldn't the federal government have seen this coming and done something about it?
The contract for surveillance that I'm aware of. There's a contract for surveillance across several kilometers. The question then is what's happening with that contract? Is it well implemented? I always say this: the problem with Nigeria is not brilliant people, lack of brilliant people or brilliant laws or policies. And I dare say the minister is quite a brilliant individual. Now, the issue is with one, implementation, two, at times corruption. So you'd ask yourself, what's wrong? What's happening with that contract? There is actually a surveillance contract in place. It's implementation you need to ask. How is government's role? We really don't care. You and I shouldn't be bothered. If you ask for a job, you then have an obligation to perform. But yes, you could make excuses around the historical challenges, and because of the long lead times around energy, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's electricity, whether it's even mining to a more limited extent, it's a long lead term. So if you begin to do things, you at times do not see the real result immediately. It's very difficult to get things over the counter. Usually, you'd have a 2-3 year planning period and working towards achieving what you want to do. Azura took 7 years at the minimum, for example. So yes, they should anticipate. You should have an EMS, an emergency management system in place, have your SCADA. Even in cases where you have plant strip off, you should have spinning reserves, because if you look at our market rules, grid code, you find all of these. But are they being implemented as they should be? I dare say no. And I think that's where the challenge is, implementing these things we put in place.
But Mr. Oni, we were talking about the oil and gas sector just before this segment, and we were told that now that technology has been put in place to keep an eye on the pipelines, there are fewer cases of vandalism. Can technology not be applied in this sector as well to prevent these things that are causing these grid collapses all the time?
Absolutely, and that's why I mentioned an emergency management system. Technology does play a role in an EMS. It's technology, it's also the human factor. Letting the people in that environment know that they have a stake in that infrastructure. Because technology alone would not solve problems, because they are enablers and human beings are behind technology. That's why you find out that the worst haste in the world are technology driven. So if you have technology and you do not have the human interface, and you do not play that role, that's why technology, AI, artificial intelligence will not work without having some form of human interface, programming and all of that. So I think that technology will begin to play a role. And like I did mention, they've started to put an EMS in place. It's now whether the guys who are supposed to work alongside that technology do what they're supposed to do, and whether there's proper monitoring, checks and balances. That's what we expect in the power sector, and hopefully in the coming year, this year, the minister and everyone else working, and state governors can do more to ensure that there's protection of infrastructure. The law already does have provisions around punishment, serious, and there are copious provisions around those. So it's technology, it's also the human factor, and letting the people in that environment know that this infrastructure is important to them. Maybe even reorientation. So our issues are technology, soft issues too, like reorientation too, do play a critical role.
Well, quite a number of things happened in the year gone by. Let me ask you, Mr. Omar, how significant was the tiff, the little ish between the generating companies and the distribution companies in particular?
Yeah, a lot of things happen in the past year, and when you ask about the tiff between the generating and the distribution, I will say the summary is about money. The issue is about liquidity, right? The generating companies are expecting their funds from the distribution company, which is the end of the value chain. But at the end of the day, you realize that the money that the generating company is getting is not up to 40% of their invoices. So that's a very difficult thing to do. From the inception of the power generation to the consumption, you as a generating company, you are getting less than 40% of your invoice. That poses a challenge. That poses a threat, and this calls a question of how viable, how are the generating companies able to keep supplying, the people, and the answer is simple. It goes back to the company supplying them gas, which means there are a lot of backlog of gas amount that is always going unsettled. That's the reason why we keep having this electricity without, the full payment. Today, if those gas companies decide that they need 100% of their funds, it will just, everybody will not have this energy. So, and that's also, part of the reason why I said when they increased that tariff to that Bane tariff around April last year, it improves the inflows a little bit, but not as, a satisfactory level that the generating companies would wish to have. And another thing that the discourse have been discussing is the issue of metering, which is a very, very difficult thing. In a customer population of 30 million in the country, only about 6 or 7 million are metered. And that's why I see, the minister has tried to come up with some initiatives, particularly the PMI, which is the presidential metering. So far, they have planned to, inject 700 billion naira from the Federation account. And when you look at the analysis, 420 billion was already deducted from the FAC analysis sheet so far, which means based on the technical advisor's information, he said by the Q1 and Q2 of this year, they are going to install 2 million meters. Although that's a stretch, but I believe some progress will be made. But that number, I don't believe the utilization will be 100%. But this is a step in the right direction, and the metering installation need to be moving fast as possible, considering the fact that people cannot afford to pay 200 naira for electricity without meter in their houses, and that's a significant challenge. So the better or the more fast they install those meters, the better for them, because metering is one of the lifeblood of revenue recovery. As long as you have meter, your revenue is assured. With little effort means to cater for that.
Mr. Oni, Let's look at the issue of pricing. The Band A, for instance, went from 68 naira per unit to 225 naira. So sometimes, even when the electricity is there, people cannot access it because it is too expensive. The speed with which we went up in price, I mean, can you really justify that? We didn't go up gradually. We just flew from 68 to 225.
Yes, I think it's same with the broader reforms. I think that I've been of the view that, and maybe the president is wrong and I'm right, I don't know. I've been of the view that some of these reforms should be taken one after the other. The reforms all came like a flood, right? Similar for what's happening in the electricity sector. Now, there's always been that debate and argument between access. Now, access means it's available, and affordability. Available, if you can't afford it, then you can't access it, despite the fact that the door is open. Now, I think I'm of the view that the analysis is that it's just 15% of that population, and that they think it's people who can afford it. There are positives and there are negatives there, because the argument around feeders, certain feeders, even permeating areas where people can afford that amount. So it's feeder based, right? But people have had those arguments, and some people have also said that. So there's the positives. Some people then begin to have electricity if you can afford it. But is that fair? Is a debate. However, on the other side, there are debates that you're then saying that if I can afford, I pay what? I pay almost $1 million every month, sadly, where I live, because it's an estate and it's an IPP in this case, not even Band A, because the disco facility is bad. So the question is, if I can afford it, not necessarily the case that everyone else can. Yeah. So there will always be positives and negatives. The intention is, this argument, I think it's even more expensive than places like Canada. There are debates that, they use more hydro and all of that. I think it's quite expensive. But it's come down anyway. I think it's about 206.50 kobo now, if I'm not mistaken, for Band A. So yes, I think access first, and then as it becomes more attractive for investment, prices come down. Look at what happened even with PMS. It went as high as 1,004, 1,006, and now it's about 899. So I think that if states do enough, then you have enough space at the national grid, and prices can come down. Recall that we're also paying for inefficiency. So if you pay for inefficiency, you're paying so much, right? So those inefficiencies need to go down. That's why NERC is forcing certain discos to be sold. I hear Ibadan, Kano is gone, Kaduna, Benin, still some disputes, but that's also going. So I think that it usually is the case that when you have such reforms, things can be that way. Things can initially be expensive. But if you continue to work at it, push, we will then begin to see more competition, more sources, more alternatives. People become more creative. Like a Glow at that time when some other guy said you couldn't do per minute or per second rather, and then he started to do the per second. So I expect that this can be the case. We can't directly compare electricity to telecoms, but it's still market, right? It's market forces of demand and supply. The more supply you have, prices then go down. Of course, you need to take into consideration the inputs, such as gas. But if we begin to have more hydro get connected, and we do an economic merit dispatch arrangement where the cheaper sources of electricity are dispatched before the more expensive, then you would have hydro and all of that, and that can drive down the price. Because I've had that argument with some guys at NERC that our electricity is even more expensive at the Band A level than what you have in places like Canada and elsewhere. So you're right, but I think that you can look at it depending on what side of the table you sit. There are pros, to be honest, and there are definitely issues with it. And an issue around enforcement too. People have argued that when they have local issues beyond the feeder, then it's still a problem, because you say 20 hours from the feeder, but I have issues with my transmitter and even my meter. I have to change my meter and I have to pay for it. I have to pay all of that money.
Didn't the government come out recently, Dr. Oni? Didn't the government come out recently to say that people shouldn't be paying for these meters?
Okay, that's true. And it then goes to enforcement. I say we say the right things, we have the right policies, we have brilliant people, but the bridge we almost always fail to cross is the bridge of enforcement. One, two. I also think mine is slightly different because it's an IPP. But that said, I think that that's government policy, and that's what the rules state.
But we need to answer. We need to understand that situation, Dr. Oni. We sincerely need to it, and maybe Mr. Omar will also want to weigh in later, because more than once, the government, NERC, through NERC, has come out to say people should not be paying for meters. As far back as the Fashola days as Minister of Power, we heard that we shouldn't be paying for meters.
Because the meters do not belong to the customer.
Because the meters do not belong to us. My phone is mine, I buy it, right? But I can determine which network I want to put in on it. However, I can't do the same for electricity, right? So why should I have to pay for meters?
Okay, so I'll take you through history summarily, very quickly, within a minute. Initially, it was the case that you didn't have to. At some point, you had to, but then you get discounted billing so that you can recover that sum over a period of time. At some point, you could have an arrangement with your disco around meters. Even in the Electricity Act, you can invest in the network and then get that money back, right? So the policy at the moment is that you're not supposed to pay for meters, but because all of this infrastructure at the end of the day belong to the disco. But enforcement is a different conversation, one. Two, it's also a Nigerian thing. More often than not, when there's a challenge, rather than go through the old org, maybe because of the length of time, people just prefer to, you know what, I've got the money, let me deal with this issue and move on, rather than not have electricity for the next 1 month, next 2 or 3 months. So it still goes to enforcement. It goes to ensuring that there is speed in resolving all of these issues. Because if you look at the process, at times you need to first go back to the disco, which is the source of the problem, when you then do not get a resolution before you then can move to NERC. So there's a process in place. It's whether we are willing to, it's similar to someone eats your car, whether you can call insurance, whether you can go to court. Most people just move on. And I think it's a Nigerian thing. If we begin to enforce rights, begin to use the court system more, you would find out that some of these things change. But then it means that we have to also look at macro issues. Macroeconomic issues. The court system needs to work. NEC needs to be more efficient, and they're doing a lot around regulations.
You know, when you talk about courts, I'm just wondering. Okay, so I start the case today, and then what happens? Anyway, let me ask.
It ends in 50 years.
Let me ask Mr. Omar the same question. Is that the same way it happens in the north? People are struggling whether or not they will buy the meters, or do they get the meters free in the north? Or in Yola, where you are in particular?
You know, it's not only about meters. The entire electrical, items and equipment, no customer is supposed to purchase it. And I saw NEC campaigning about it some days on their social media page. They are saying that you are not supposed to buy or repair your transformer or any other cable that, distribute electricity to your house. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing with the meter, because those are all assets, property of the electricity distribution company. So you are supposed, but that is where you pay for efficiency twice. What I said is that so far, when you look at the tariff components of the cost that a customer paid for his electricity, you realize 20 to 30% of that cost is inefficiency. You pay for inefficiency there. And then when you have a problem of vandalism, your local transformer is vandalized, you realize that instead of a disco to come swiftly and fix it, then you find community coming together to bring money and then fix it. That means in your tariff component, you are paying for inefficiency in form of ATC&C. And then when your electricity is vandalized, you also bring money together and pay for that. And then when it comes to meters, you equally pay for it. You wait for when the discos are going to refund you the money in form of, token. So you realize that the inefficiency is a lot. But then, as Mr. Oni said, it's a case of, Nigerian thing and implementation. The NEC has brought a lot of programs regarding metering, from CAPME to national mass metering to meter as a provider and so on. But the summary of all this program, it means that it provides the discos, with the meters to meter those customers for free, with the exception of few programs which requires the customer to pay and then the disco refund. And the reason they do that is because they realize that the discos do not have money, to invest in that meter in a short period of time. It says, okay, customers that have money, buy your meters and then we will refund you. It's a form of, customers assisting the distribution company with the liquidity. That argument either is right or wrong is a debatable issue. And I think that's the reason why currently now what they plan to do so far, there are 2 or 3 kind of program, as I mentioned earlier. There is that presidential, there is a World Bank disrep, and then, meter asset provider. So based on what the government said, they plan to meter 10 million within 5 years. And then they equally try to get 3.2 million meters from the World Bank, program, which means they are going to meter customers free, because the challenge for metering now cannot wait, considering the fact that, as I said, nobody is going to pay 200 naira for unit of electricity when he is not metered. There is no justification for that, and nobody will agree to do that. So even those people that are metered, they find it, and the challenge of metering is that even those that are metered will always complain that, okay, the metering is not good or replacement. And recently, last 2 months, we see some obsolete meters that have expired. It's decommissioned. So a lot of campaign has gone around that the disco need to also replace the meters of those people, the old meters, because they cannot vend new token now. So it's clearly a whole lot of and the summary, I like to put the summary into, which is, it's a case of finance, money problem, and the governance problem. The owners of these companies need to either bring money to solve this problem. The government is trying its own part so that we can be able to move past.
I think it'll be good for us to hear from the MDs of any disco who is capable of coming on air to explain these things to Nigerians, because there are so many questions to ask the managing director or CEO or whatever of any distribution company, because we've heard more from their surrogates than from they themselves. Let's understand what you understand. Let's know what the challenges are, so that Nigerians can at least empathize whenever you have issues. Because one of the issues on the ground, gentlemen, which I would like for both of you to speak to, and I'll start from you, Mr. Umar, is as at last year, August, Genco's debts had escalated to approximately 1.495 trillion naira, reflecting significant financial strain within the sector. That's according to Energy Central. We also understand that the payment discrepancies between the NERC, the NERC reported that in the second quarter of last year, DISCO's remittances to the NBET dropped from 79.09%, dropped to 79.09% from 99.33% in the first quarter. And of course, we understand that that shortfall also hindered Genco's ability to maintain and expand generation capacities. Gentlemen, speak to this. Mr. Umar, you go first.
Yeah, so the issue of payment dropping, you caught the report for Q2, and if I recall very correctly, that's the time that the price for Banner was increased. Increasing Banner price is a double-edged sword for the discos, because when you move Banner to 225, it means the disco invoice has also pushed up. So it's a case of either the disco collect that revenue from customer, or it risks having high cost of power that they are going to settle to the market. So if you are able to collect, it means you have been able to recover much, reduce your losses. But if you fail to actually collect money from those customers who consume energy on the service base of Ban A tariff, it means your cost is already increased from the Genco's invoice. So failure of you to collect that money will actually reduce the remittance that you're supposed to pay embed. And this actually poses a very difficult problem. So that's why I said, when they increase that Ban A to 200, the discos must collect that money. Without them collecting that money, they are increasing the cost, or they are increasing problem for the Gencos and equally to the gas suppliers. And this is a very serious problem. And I think that is also what necessitated the NERC to release 21 billion naira in June for the first tranche of presidential metering. 21 billion was released to the 11 discos, for the purchase of metering to try and meter, Ban A customers to reduce the case of unmetered. This is all to ensure that they have been able to recover some revenue that they will be able to release to the Gencos and the gas companies. So this is very critical. That's the Q2 report. When you look at the Q3 report that was recently released by the Commission, there has been an improvement in such, because the discos have tried to prioritize their feeders. They have been able to get money and understand how can educate the people to try to understand some of the problem and get that money. So the Q3 report that is available is a bit more improvement compared to the Q2 that you just highlighted. And also I believe that for this year, I like to say that the litmus test for the Ban A is going to happen in that February to May, when we are on the peak of heat period within the year. That's when we'll be able to know that if the discourse will be able to maintain supply for that 20 hours without serious cases of breakdown, rendering from grid collapse to vandalization, any other issues. And that's when we will say, okay, that Ban A will actually sustain, or else we are going to say
it would seem like even the issues of Band-Aids tend to have been flattened somehow. But we'll come back to that one. Well, Dr. Oni, your take.
Okay, my take is that first, ministries, departments, and agencies of the federal government need to pay their bills. That arrangement needs to be tightened, because if they do not pay their bills to the discos can't pay Gencos, and Gencos cannot even pay for gas, right?
What's the percentage of debt that these MDAs owe the discos?
You hear all sorts of figures from around, I've heard around 600 billion naira is what the latest figures. Yes, that's the latest figure I have heard, right? So if you owe that much, and it's not MDAs at the federal level alone, MDAs at the state level. So it's a huge class. Now, if you owe that much, that's already a problem. So you don't expect that you'd have power at some point, because historically, there have been debts owed to gas companies. Some of that debt's been paid, but there's still substantial debt. That's one. Secondly, like you did mention, in Q3 it improved because the discos then began to concentrate around Band A guys to ensure that they could get more from them. And you hear people complain, even many people switch off AC, switch off stuff they ordinarily wouldn't have in the past to also bring down their costs. So ministries, departments, agencies of the federal government and state governments need to pay. There needs to be an arrangement where you can even take money from the source before they get their monthly allocation, because that will then help. And in terms of infrastructure, there's more that needs to be done by the discos. With the ongoing sale, we hope that guys who've got the cash are the ones who are now succeeding. There are rumors around who's bought Eco Disco from West Power and Gas, and they seem to be guys who have done it and who are succeeding around the hydro at the moment, and the gas company too. So I think if that goes on and we can work around that transmission, the state succeed, revenues will then improve. We can pay for gas, because if you cannot pay for your inputs, then you don't expect an output. So like Abubakar did mention, it's improved actually. From Q2, what you did see was a Q2 report. I think in Q3, it did improve substantially, actually, what the discos have paid. But there's still a lot of debts. By
Mr. Omar, I'd like you to talk to us about what we expect will actually affect our lives. This Siemens project, the presidential initiative that was initiated last month, in the last month of 2024, the Siemens initiative, the Siemens project.
Yeah, the Siemens project has been a bit of a controversial. There are so many things going, but then we are also expecting the TCN to come up with a lot of reports. But currently, as the industry is going now, the TCN themselves, they are undergoing unbundling process into two sub-units independently. And then if you have been following their social media pages, they have been installing some various power transformers across the country. And this is also to help stabilize, under the grid. And then also the Siemens project is there available to try to put some infrastructure in place to improve or reduce the cases of, incessant grid collapse that we witnessed in the last year. So not much, information is actually available to the public regarding that Siemens, but the bane of the Siemens is that it means to reduce the cases of those grid collapse and to deliver electricity to people in a very hitch-free manner. So that is a case of, but then there are a lot of ongoing trust issues that the contract or the program has been stalled for long. The project is meant to be completed in 2025, if I recall right. But then up to now we are in 2025, and then we are still redoing it, recommissioning, or I will say, re-enabling or starting the program that was supposed to be completed for a while. But I think the only thing we have to do is we have to be optimistic. I will only be optimistic regarding cement because there is now what I call, a price that, that will serve the markets to be able to recover money. And that kind of things will improve the installation progress of the cement. And I will also, have my fingers crossed, considering the fact that let TCN complete their unbundling process, and then I will see how cement will perform with regard to the TSP segment of the transmission company.
Well, one is still wondering whether or not the Siemens thing is ever going to get off the ground.
Well, we hear about it now, and then we don't, and then we hear about it again, and then we don't hear about it. So we don't really know what's happening.
Too many questions about whether or not it's even a good investment in the first place. But that's a matter for another day. Let me ask you, Dr. Oni, as we wind down in about 3 minutes from now, and I'll ask this question. You've stated it earlier, but I'll ask the question from this text that we got on X. Biziano, that's Olabisi Konye, at Olabisi Konye, saying, the attention that government pays to electricity makes one wonder if they are ready to serve the people or just to satisfy their hunger for personal gain. Ondo south of Irele, Ilaje, SL, local government area, have been in total darkness for over 12 years. Any offense? Leading to the issue you mentioned the other time about the capacity of states to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity now that the law empowers them to. What are the mines, the bottlenecks, the challenges that you see in the way for those states that are already taking the initiative? And how do they cross those hurdles?
Okay, thank you very much. First thing, they must understand why we failed at the federal level. Otherwise, they will just replicate the same thing. That's the first thing. Why have we failed? Poor infrastructure, neglect, political interference, and state governors need to be careful so that the right people are in the right places. You do not give political favors. Otherwise, you'll be back running to NERC or the federal government, and it would have failed. So that's critical. They must understand why we failed. Now, when they understand why we failed, and I'll tell you some of the reasons, and I've mentioned some, the state governor shouldn't interfere. Let the best people run that system. Let the laws be implemented. Ensure that you make your state the toast of investors. Let guys come and let your word be your bond. If you say that it's going to be this price, you say it's going to be, the license is going to be for 20 years, then it should be for 20 years. Midway, don't say they voted for the other party or you heard there was a challenge. Politics and business should be separated. I know it's a difficult thing, but if you want to succeed, those are the steps they need to take. They need to ensure that the institutions are in place. They need to think properly about pricing. Because once they take over the market in their state, if there are subsidies, the states will have to pay the subsidy. And if they can't afford it, the problem starts. If you say we're giving subsidy of 50 naira, 100 naira per kilowatt hour, and at the end of every month, you're going to pay 10 billion, 20 billion, whatever it is, and that's almost all of your subvention, you started to fail. So, true, you don't have to do it if you do not have the capacity. But if you have the capacity, you need to think about infrastructure. You need to think about how it would work with integrate with the wholesale market, your retail arrangement. Do you want to have a supply arrangement different from distribution? Do you want to have a regulator separate from the guys who check standards? Do you want to have a liability management company? How do you want to deal with gas?
With these few words, these few words of yours, Dr. Oni, I think the state government should just call you for some consultancy. But I don't know if Mr. I think Mr. Omar may also have a word or two about what the minefields that the state governments may have to cross in order to be able to start their own electricity industry apparatus in their individual states.
Yeah, on this state, I like to look at the end from the beginning. What I mean here is that pricing is the major issue. I always sympathize with the state. The electricity generation cost averagely from the grid is around 120 to 150 naira per kilowatt. So I sympathize with the state considering the fact that if they do not, create subsidy for its individual, that means the consumers of that state are going to pay high electricity price. And that will be problematic considering the fact that the case of the consumers failing to pay will trickle back to the market activating their clauses, which means it can go to the extent of disconnecting the entire electricity operating in that zone, and that will be a problem. The second leg I see is that a case of politics interfering in the electricity, because whenever people, huge geographical people, do not have electricity, the only issue that comes there is a political solution. You realize that the politicians are now involved. For instance, the entire community or state or urban area that do not have electricity, you find the senators or the ministers, trying to interfere. And that is problematic because when you cannot be able to pay, politics cannot resolve it.
Oh, dear.
When you bring in politics, you are now creating more costs.
Well, clearly, Mr. Omar, and you and Dr. Oni, you need to sit down with all of these people and have conversations with them, because this angle that you have also gone, I thought Dr. Oni was joking the other time when he said that it will now be a campaign instrument, and you are talking about the same thing. Anyway, those are conversations for future deliberation. We have to thank you at this time. Mr. Abubakar Omar is an electricity consultant based in Yola, as well as Dr. Ayodele Oni, who is an energy policy expert. Gentlemen, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you for having us.
So we take a short break and we'll be right back. I saw a skit in the course of last year, December last year. This fellow showed some international journalists who wanted to do a documentary in Nigeria. So when they got to Ikoyi, they saw high-rise buildings. That doesn't look like Africa. They moved to an industrial area, maybe in Ogun State or somewhere, only looking grand. No, doesn't represent Africa. Then they now went to the village. Now saw red bricks and everything.
That's more like it.
So the cameraman was like, so all that one is not Nigeria. It's only the one that represents poverty. It was eye-opening of sorts.
Yes, I agree with you, absolutely. We're coming. It's taking us time, but we're coming. Yeah. I know that many won't like to believe that because we have so many people living in multidimensional poverty.
Exactly.
And we got the figure of 133 million, about 2 years ago?
3. Going to 3 now.
Going to 3 years ago. And it's the World Bank that told us that. And it now says that more than half of the people in African countries south of the Sahara, that area includes us, sadly, that we are living in multidimensional poverty. And this comes from their 2004 Key Development Challenges report,
2024.
which shows how the world is failing to reduce poverty. It measured using 3 things: how much money people have, which is less than $2.15 per person per day, their education, and whether they have basic services like electricity and water, not to mention education, because as far as I am concerned, that is now a basic. So government statistics from 2022 showed that 133 million people, like we said before, in Nigeria were living in multidimensional poverty. More poor people live in the north, about 86 million, than the south, which is about 47 million people. And many Nigerians cannot access clean cooking fuel, proper toilets, healthcare, enough food, and decent accommodation. These are all very sad. And it looked like since subsidy was removed in May last year, May 2023 rather, this is 2025, come on. Since oil subsidy was removed, it seems that more people have fallen into poverty. Now, to look at this with us and maybe discuss ways of fighting the predicament in which we find ourselves, I'd like to welcome head consultant IntelServe Incorporated, Mr. Roman Osegale.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And we also have the Executive Director of Nigeria Network of NGOs, Mr. Oluseyi Oyebisi, who joins us virtually. Good morning, sir.
Morning, man. Thanks for having me.
Mr. Osegale, these figures are very depressing, if you ask me. This is the beginning of a new year, and we start the year by talking about more than half of our population living in poverty, no access to health care, no access to good food, no access to, and the list just goes on and on. So we need to find a way of dealing with this, Mr. Osegale.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. I said this about, was it 2-3 years ago when that index was released? And I said that obviously it wasn't going to get better.
It wasn't?
Yeah, it wasn't going to get better. And
it hasn't?
Yes, it hasn't. Because numbers don't lie, right? The Multidimensional Poverty Index is a framework for assessing poverty that tracks deprivation across 3 dimensions and 10 indicators. I sent in some slides, right? They put out 2 slides. You go to slide 1, you see that health, child mortality, nutrition, education, years of schooling, enrollment, living standard, water, sanitation, electricity, cooking fuel. Now, when you now go to the budget, because my job is to track things like this using numbers and where the problems actually lie, right? And how you can actually get out of this stuff. Now, go to slide 2, you'll find out that, look at the 2025 budget. Now, and these have always been the composition of the budget. First of all, your budget is the primary instrument of economic expansion. And you're supposed to put money where it will benefit lives, benefit the standard of living of the people, make life easier for them, not structure the budget in the sense that it puts money in private pockets. Now, when you look at infrastructure, if you go back to that slide, the slide 1, right? Living standard comes under majorly infrastructure. When you look at the infrastructure part of the budget on slide 2, it's only 4.06 trillion, which basically represents only about 8% of the budget. Health is 2.48 trillion, representing only 5% of the budget, and education, 3.52 trillion, representing only 7% in total. The major things that are supposed to create wealth in an economy and improve the standard of living only account for 20% of your budget. Mind you, Nigeria is a mineral resource-rich country, but a fiscal poor country. Did you get that? We are a mineral resource-rich country, but a fiscal poor country. We are a poor country. But what surprises anyone that knows how to read the budget, what you find out is that majority of the funds is now allocated to recurrent expenditure. So if we continue on this trajectory, honestly, it's not going to change. Nothing is going to change. The figures are there. They are very open. They speak for themselves. So it's just like saying you earn 100,000 naira a month, and you have maybe 4 or 5 kids, and rather than putting majority of those funds into investment that will better the lives of your family, you're putting 80%, you're going to nightclubs, you hang out at beer parlor, and you only spend 20% on what really matters in the house. You will never get out of poverty. That's just the baseline.
Mr. Oyebisi, it looks like since 2023, the inequality in our society has widened. You can see the clear divide between the rich and the poor. those people who considered themselves to be middle class before, they seem to have been wiped out by rise in fuel prices, rise in power, food inflation. I mean, and the list just goes on and on. People are finding it more and more difficult to survive in this country. I mean, are we just going to let it continue?
I think no, we won't let it continue, and that's why we need a whole of sector approach to fighting poverty in the country, and also to establish the fact that there are activities being run or being done by government to address this. There are three areas where globally we agreed that if you want to solve issues around poverty, you must look at social protection systems. You must also look at how do you ensure that you tax people fairly, and that at the end of the day you're also able to measure and also understand how poverty is affecting population without leaving anyone behind. When you look at how the Nigerian government at this time is addressing poverty, you see that we have some social investment laws and also programs, which again has been ridden with corruption. And when you look at the budget, and I'm glad that we're bringing the budget conversation into this as well. We keep looking at the federal government budget only. We haven't looked at the budget of the 36 states that we have in the country as well. So for social protection in 2025, I think I'm seeing a 200 billion, budget that is there. You also want to look at issues around health and education, plus also energy poverty, the electricity conversation that we're having prior to this segment of the program itself. So the whole of sector approach will then mean that how do we share prosperity in ways that ensures that we can lift many out of poverty. At the moment, I do think from the last statistics I saw, the Nigerian government is only able to support 25 million people. If we're going to use the 133 million statistics that we have as at 2022 or thereabout, that means that there's still a lot of about 110 or 115 or thereabout that still needs to be lifted out of poverty. What is happening at the state level in being able to provide some level of social protection for these individuals that are vulnerable and that will need government support? We need to think through that and then begin to piggyback also on what our state governments budgeting for. There's a need for us to improve agriculture. There's a need for us to also find ways of ensuring that at the informal economy. I was reading a recent report by MoneyPoint that gives us a picture of what is happening at the informal economy. And that, in 1 month, most businesses in the informal economy would make like under 250,000 naira. When you take that back to the statistics of $2.15 in terms of poverty, those living under that World Bank benchmark of $2.15, which would go to over 3,000 naira at this time, you begin to see that those in the informal sector are making something like 8,000 naira per day. So how do we grow the informal sector in such a way that economy there can boom and more jobs can be created? Of course, that report that I quoted also mentioned that people between 18 and 34 thereabout would have small businesses, and the food vendor, retail businesses, agriculture are where you are seeing this business happening in the informal sector. How do we at the state level in all the 36 states of the Federation grow these industries or these sectors in ways that helps us to create that prosperity so that people would be lifted out of poverty and they won't depend on government handouts. So this is at the federal level.
Okay.
At the local government level, where we also have the issues of the local government autonomy, and the role of local government itself also has to be that we need to look at local government as a tool for development as well. And one is glad that now we now have that autonomy. We need to shift attention also to the local government in terms of their role in national development, and how cumulatively can they bring all of this to bear?
Mr. Yebisi, I think we need to be a little more forthright and, should I say, decisive about the role of subnationals and the local governments, just as you have mentioned now. Because it will seem like every time we talk about these national figures and national issues, we look at just the federal government most of the time. Mr. Osegala, you will also be speaking to that in a short while. But because to a large extent, the data that came from the NBS, in collaboration with whoever they collaborated, says that as at going to 3 years now, 133 million Nigerians, and that we have benchmarked our living standards at $2.15 per day, which, as you said, is about 3,000 naira. Is the economy the same in Lagos as it is in Sokoto, which, according to that statistics, has the highest number of multidimensionally poor people in the country? So if we look at it from that perspective, is there a direct role, immediate role, for state governments concerning the people in their immediate environments and the local government? Is there a plan to take people out of poverty as we have seen the federal government plan it? Shouldn't we have the plans of the state governments in each of these states also detailing how they are intervening in the lives of their poor?
Absolutely, and that's the million-dollar question that we now need to start asking states. Where is your state development plan? And how does this help us to think through development within your immediate community? When you look at that statistics, it tells us how many people are in multidimensional poverty across the 36 states of the Federation. And we see Sokoto, for instance. How are we also looking at the budget of Sokoto state government? To then say, what are they prioritizing? Are there social protection systems for the vulnerable? How are they prioritizing education? What are the regulatory guarantees that we have if businesses will go to Sokoto, for instance? What type of trade is happening, interstate trade is happening, taking advantage of what can be produced in Sokoto in abundance, can be taken down to either Lagos to make more money and collect more taxes, or brought back to somewhere in the southwest or somewhere in the southeast. What is happening in terms of growth at the local level? How are political leaders and also policymakers giving us programs that can help us to grow the economy at the state level? What you have seen, and I always say this jokingly, to say that what you have seen at the federal level, if it is implemented 50-60% by states as well, we would see some level of progress. And now that we again have the local government autonomy, it is important that we also focus on the role of local governments. Okay. What is the role of local governments in community development?
I think that needs to be detailed out, because it is in the local governments that we have all of the mineral deposits that Nigeria has. But let me ask you, Mr. Osegale, isn't there a role for the subnationals? And I've seen the figures that you put out, the federal government's budget. We don't know what the budget of Lagos State is like, particularly solving these problems. Port Harcourt, River State, Taraba State, you name it.
Okay, I think it was last year or so, I ran through the 36 states, including the FCT, for the past 5 years, looking at education, health, and majorly all their budgets. If you can show me one state in Nigeria that runs is 70% capital expenditure and probably maybe a 30% recurrent expenditure. And I'll bring back my grandmother from the dead and tell you she's a virgin. You understand? Do you understand? See, the truth is this. The truth is this. Now, I doing my research, I was going through some figures and trying to research something that a professor had said in the US, that to understand economics, you must liken it to the human physiology, right? That a single or a common code, if not properly attended to, can give you lung infection. From lung infection, it will spread to your kidney, from kidney to this and that, and eventually to your heart, and eventually kill the host, right? Now, if you do not take your medication or you skip medications, you know what happens? It can lead to complications and side effects. Now, they're giving you, or you know the roadmap. We are always saying palliatives. We're saying social protection. That will only last you 3, maybe 4 weeks or 1-2 months. Then what happens afterwards? My solution has always been, and which I keep challenging and I'll continue to challenge, do the right thing. The other speaker was talking about farmers and all. Now, if you read the World Bank report, it states things like, or factors like, people within the hinterlands not being able to bring out or bring their goods, you understand, to the city. And then how much it costs them because of bad roads, and how much of the goods they have to lose in the process because it takes them days. That falls under infrastructure. Do you understand? Now, when you look at education, you look at health. For instance, there was a time I was on this program and I was talking about the middle class, which she just spoke about right now, and how much the middle class spend on school fees. To get out of poverty, you need money. That is the very first factor you need, so that it can propel you. You need money for investment. But when you are not able to get, there's a way I wrote it down here, that if there is no margin of income above survival that can be invested for the future, you can't get out of poverty. So when a person spends more than 50% of their income on school fees, and then what do they have left?
But is this a function of what the government does or what the economy is dictating? And I'm speaking specifically about the state governments, because are we saying that all decisions are made by the federal government?
No, it's not made by the federal government. But I said something earlier. Show me a state that is running a 70% capital expenditure.
You will bring your grandmother and scholarship. But is that to say that they are helpless totally?
Okay, let me say something. I spoke at the last platform, October 1st. The speaker before me, there are 2 things here: deliberate and, let's just say, oversight, right? Like in the budget. I don't want to believe that the budget is deliberate, but let me state something somebody said. And you can go on YouTube and look at the videos, and your station even covered it. He said there was this findings that northern lawmakers and senators have spent more time in the House than the southern ones. So he went out to do his findings. And in the process of talking to 1 or 2 people, they told him that, yeah, that's true, because you people from the South, you like education, so more people will contest the seat with you. But I am the only one who is educated in my constituency, and they have no choice than to keep representing me.
To keep me representing them?
Yes. No, to keep representing him every 4 years to contest. So that shows you that there are some deliberate efforts to keep people in abject illiteracy, so that they do not move forward. But
at the state level?
Yes, at the state level, because of some personal interest. So there's a lot that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
Those deliberate efforts. Okay, so why are you keeping these people down because of your own personal interest?
Now, so what makes that also worse, pardon me, Alero, is, and maybe I should ask Mr. Ibisi this one. Years ago, not too long ago, I think it was former President Obasanjo that was making a comment. He said, if we do not take care, we're already raising the next generation of terrorists, bandits in the country. And only because we are not giving enough attention to young people in the country. Which day was it? It was just over the weekend, no, in the course of the week. We were told by the Minister of Education that 70% of Nigerians are aged 30 and below. 70%. In another 10 years, we know what the figures will be. 20 years, we know what those people will be, where those people will be. And if they do not have the education that Mr. Osegale is talking about, they do not have access to entrepreneurship, we can just imagine what we are rearing. And guess what? Each one of these young people live in states. What would be your proposition?
I think we're sitting on a keg of gunpowder. However, we must also understand that there are a lot of cultural, religious, and societal myths and thinking around education, as it were. And the fact that we have a vast level of population that are, not in school. You have the school program by the federal government and also with the support of the state governments, where children must be in school without having to be on the streets, hawking and all of those things. How have we implemented that? And what, like the other speaker said, how oversighting that the state assemblies, the executives, the policymakers, the civil servants that are in charge of such programs, what does enforcement look like? Especially for addressing the issue of children that are meant to be in school, which is compulsory as a law. How do we ensure that that is properly implemented? But the economic conversations also then comes in, which is when you ask your ward to go to school, the infrastructure, the classrooms, how conducive are they? We do, of course, there's the 1 meal a day system that also exists that ensures that at least a child that comes to school would have a very good nutritional meal to eat. But when you look at the corruption there as well, and the fact that that is also not working effectively, then you say to yourself, is there anything we should have done that we're not doing in terms of policy? I think we have the policies. It's actually in the implementation and the actual oversight that needs to go in this direction, the questions that need to be asked by the state assembly members, by the national assembly members, the questions that need to be asked by the governors themselves, who may have put commissioners in charge of education, the question that citizens themselves also need to ask. All right. Again, going back to the conversation around school fees, and I think we need to have an airline consensus. When you think you can afford better education for your ward, you take them to your private schools, right? Forgetting that public schools help you to save money, and that it is where others that are vulnerable can also get better education. But we all failed to focus on, getting better service delivery in terms of education. So we now need to come back and look at what exactly are state plans for education. What does the budget look like? What are they budgeting for? How do we get the state assemblies from being complacent to actually doing the work of oversighting on education and ensuring that parents who do not send their wards to school are properly encouraged to do that? Where they have failed to do that, implement the law. As you have said, it has to be compulsory for any children in any state from ages 5 or thereabouts to get up to secondary education. And if this education is also going to be free, let it be totally free. Provide books, ensure teachers are properly trained, ensure that we have systems that tracks outcomes, so that when a child goes into school, they are learning what should be learned, and that we have proper educational outcomes by the time they finish primary school and they progress to secondary school. But by GSS 3, we have a system that also ensures that they can go into trade if they do not want to further their education by going to university and all of those things. Are we paying attention to technical education as well? I do understand that most parents would like their children to go to university or to go to the polytechnic, but at the end of the day, when they finish that university, they are still coming back to learn a skill. You find many of them going back to learn tailoring, learning graphics design, and all of those bits. How do we? There's also the part of curriculum development, ensuring that curriculum can teach us 21st century skills that can help us to think critically and also be able to be part of an economy that prospers for all of us as both Nigerians, Africans, and the world.
Okay, I'd like to respond to that question.
Okay.
And in responding to that question, I want to quote a book that was written in early 2000s. It says, the destinies of the haves is intrinsically linked to the destinies of the have-nothings at all. That if the perpetrators of 9/11 may have been wealthy Saudi citizens, but they found succor and sanctuary in the poverty-stricken states of Afghanistan. This was written in 2002, and he said that Africa is not in the front line against terrorism, but it soon could be. Now, NBS released the data of ransom paid in 12 months. 2.23 trillion ransom was paid in 12 months. Now, the 2 to 3 million out-of-school children of the late 90s and early 2000s, and then the 68 million that lived in poverty then, are the ones terrorizing us today.
Yes.
Like what you said, today we now have how many people? 18.5 to what? To 20 million kids outside school. And 133 million living in multidimensional poverty. Nobody needs a soothsayer to tell us what will be happening in the next 10, 15 years. And what baffles me, to be very honest, is that you and I, government, everybody in this country, we still go about our normal business. We buy the expensive cars, we live the expensive life, we live the luxurious life we want to. When everybody is supposed to be rolling up their sleeves, the destinies of the haves is intrinsically linked to the destinies of the have-nothings at all. In the next 10, 15 years, you and I may not be able to step out. True. That's the truth.
True. Mr. Sayale, you know, when I think about this penchant that we have now for giving palliatives to people, it doesn't sit well with me, because I think about, don't give them fish, teach them how to fish. Then I remember, I mean, paradoxically, I also recall when Raji Fashola was governor of Lagos State, and he tried to remove area boys from the streets and teach them some kind of vocation. And most of these kids ran away. They ran away from those vocational centers. So they were so used to getting handouts or terrorizing people to get something out of them that they did not even want to use their hands to do any work. So we have got to the stage now where even those you want to teach to look after themselves are not interested in doing anything productive. Where does that leave us?
It leaves us in a very dangerous situation. One, see, I've always said this, that you don't tell people what to do. You teach them through examples. You see, those people that were not ready to learn skills are looking at the people at the top. When you have, why should I go and learn a skill when I am from Ekpoma in Edo State and I can translate trillions in numbers into words, but somebody there cannot translate billions into words. Ouch. Right? So why do I need to go learn a skill when I can go and do area talk?
And I can become the governor.
I can become the governor, I can become this or that. You understand? So you see what is happening, and they see where the funds and monies are flowing from. Do you understand? So it's a big problem. And until there's a reverse of psychology, there's a reverse of ideology, there's a reverse of the examples from the ruling class, from the elites of the country.
Our role models.
Yes, and they look at them as role models, of people who are working, who are not they're not dependent on government money to live the luxurious life. Then things might start to change, because through your example, you will be teaching these people the essence and the value of hard work.
Work.
Mr. ABC, there's something about the president said about values, saying he's going to commission a values charter. Along the line, he also talked about a youth conference that's going to last 30 days. Do you think this issue of multidimensional poverty, particularly as it relates to young people, do you think it's an issue that should be iconic during that conference?
Certainly, it should be an issue that should be on the front of mind and front burner for any strata of the population that we have, from young to old to Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, and all of those bits. It's an issue that affects all of us. Poverty doesn't know any age, it doesn't know any tribe. But I do think that the conversations that will be held may not necessarily get us anywhere. And why am I saying that is, while there's the need for us to have stakeholder consultations and speak to young people, understand their issues, you also need a simple service that can listen to everything, turn all of that into an action or an aspiration that then goes into a development plan or a work plan, and that is properly budgeted for, right? And not only budgeted for, cash backed and fund is released for those to be addressed. And whatever the issues are, they are issues that we've already heard somewhere in reports and all of that. Of course, I'm not saying don't consult with young people, but don't make it a jamboree. Make sure that we listen properly, and that when we listen to understand the issues, and that in understanding the issues, we're able to use that to develop an action plan that is well resourced, both technically and politically, but also monitored for proper implementation, and that you come back to also tell these young people how you are implementing whatever has been agreed, and what bottlenecks you're seeing, and how you are retooling and also ensuring that we can see results for them. Okay. You would find conversations on poverty, you find conversations on unemployment, you find conversations on security, you would find conversations on maybe boosting the economy and all of that. All of these are things that we already know. You look at the National Development Plan, there are things that are there already. I was reading the skills gap report that was developed during the first term of Buhari's regime. Very detailed report. Again, what have we done there? Okay. So it's not for this. We need to find a way of it doing shop, not just a talk shop now. Okay. There has to be some level of action, and that we need to move speedily as well.
Sorry, we don't even have time to take your last words on this because we've run completely out of time. So I'd just like to thank Mr. Oluseyi Oyebisi, Executive Director of Nigeria Network of NGOs, who joined us virtually, and Mr. Roman Osegale, Head Consultant, IntelServe Incorporated. Thank you very much. And we wish you both a Happy New Year indeed. Now it's time to look at healthy lifestyle tips for 2025. See you in just a moment.
New Year resolution or New Year revolution, particularly concerning your health in the year. Of course, all of last year we're talking about you getting enough sleep, exercising regularly, eating balanced diet, stress check, what else?
Cutting down sugar,
stopping eating chocolates,
drinking water,
and all those things.
Must you refer to chocolate? I said cut down on your sugar. Didn't that cover chocolates?
As I was trying to say.
Bad belly people.
Yonda Gwediga joins us again this morning. She's the Principal Consultant of Media Ideas Lifestyle and Wellness Center to tell us about healthy lifestyle tips for 2025. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
What else is new?
I'm never happy when Yonda is here.
Well,
okay.
She almost brought you a gift,
Of chocolate.
Okay. Tell us, one of our guests on Lifestyle last week we asked, how come people don't keep their promises to themselves, particularly concerning health? And a number of things revolved around discipline and motivation and all of that. Now, looking to the year ahead, what are the things that you would recommend we must do if we must stay healthy and meet our targets?
Like, my major advocacy is preventive health. Okay, and so it's a tough call, actually, pushing that line to the population. You know why? Because once you look at yourself, there's nothing wrong with me, so why should I bother? And that's why
it looks like there's nothing wrong.
Well, on the surface. And that's why resolutions are not kept, because you're like, I didn't offend somebody's mother. Neither did my mother offend somebody's mother. So why should I die? But the truth is, sub-health, which is what we don't focus on a lot of times. A lot of things are going on. How healthy is your liver? How healthy is the kidneys? Are the kidneys, how is blood flow? How narrowed down are your blood vessels? And then the pressure is building because the blood vessels are narrow. And then blood flow is reduced, and then the blood pressure goes up. And most times people say, oh, it's because I'm thinking. That's why blood pressure is going up. No, the first cause is that there is constriction. So there are a lot of things going on, sub-health, and people are not conscious until it explodes into like a cannonball.
Such as
a stroke, an angina pectoris, which is a chest pain, and that thing that it goes and then you hit your chest, and then it goes down, placation. That's the heart telling you, I want to pack up, and I'm not getting enough oxygen. I just warned you. And then it continues again. And so the body gives us a lot of signals, sub-health. And so people feel like, oh, I'm fine. So why do I have to keep to these resolutions? And that should be our focus in the year. I forgot to mention things like frequent urination in men, and a lot of hormonal problems in women, So, I'm fine. So why should I? But we should focus on ensuring the cannonball does not explode in our face. Because when it does, we are hit with a flurry of advices, and we can't seem to make the right decisions.
You just mentioned men now. Mm-hmm. What about them? Because I think I'm one of them.
Okay, so typically with men, there are basically two things that they always want to watch out for, especially with advancing age. There's nothing else than the P word that scares a man. That's the prostate, especially for those with advancing age. I find out, I look, not really a critical study, but my general observation is that the young guys don't even know what prostates are, what a prostate is, what a PSA is. And so you're talking to a young man, working class, earning capacity, okay, and you tell him, what's your PSA? He doesn't even know. And that's
PSA.
Good.
That's Professor Shegun Adeniyi, isn't it? I'm just saying.
Okay, so that's the prostate-specific antigen, which checks if there's something going on in the prostate, which could trigger maybe a BPH, which is a benign prostatic hyperplasia, which means the prostate is enlarged and could.
Is there any danger in an enlarged prostate?
Yes, there are a lot of dangers in an enlarged prostate.
So it should not be enlarged?
Yes.
Okay, so what are the dangers?
So it should not be enlarged, but it will be enlarged with age, advancing age, because a lot of things can trigger the enlargement of the prostate as a man ages. From 38 to 40, 50 especially. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what we want to always check for is, as he ages, we want to take a blood sample and look at the numbers. If something is going on in that prostate, the numbers in that PSA will change. So you always need, and it's the maximum number is for, even at 2.7, 3.2, those numbers are indicative of different things. At a 5/4, at a 10/4, those numbers are indicative of changes in the prostate, either an infection, inflammation, or a benign prostatic problem, or a malignancy.
Okay, so this is 2025, yeah? he just said he was a man, as if he wasn't sure. Yeah. So, at what age should a man begin to check his PSA, and how often should he do it, so that people like Ayo, who are not even sure whether they are men or not, can start adhering to that time frame that you give, that every 6 months, every year, or whatever, you go and check your prostate.
Take note that she mentioned my name like twice. Let's go ahead.
Okay, so, well, I would always want to say that they should watch out for the symptoms, and then, of course, the normal thing is to do your annual medicals. And we say that reports are obsolete every 6 months. So 6 months is not a bad idea to check your PSA.
So every 6 months, you go and check your PSA, okay?
But then we don't want to be an alarmist.
Mm-hmm.
No, I want to remind him.
It's better, you check and then you watch out for the symptoms of frequent urination, inability to urinate very well, or the projectile. Maybe the projectile is low. I mean, you could aim for the toilet from like 2 miles, and then now you're aiming from like 2 centimeters. So, yeah, so once the projectile is low, and then, or maybe the person is waking up to pee at night frequently, maybe like 4, 5, 6, 10 times.
That means you hardly sleep.
If you drink plenty water, uncle.
Yeah, so that's why the numbers will correlate with the symptoms. So that's why, so it's not an anarchy situation. You have to check the numbers and be sure. And quite a number of things can trigger those things. And they all have different treatment protocols, like bad lifestyle. Usually, I was actually reading the Harvard Review to prepare for this, and it was saying, at the first it said, people don't know what causes it, and then goes down to say inflammation, bad lifestyle, smoking, red meat, everything we've usually said triggers it. Okay. So it behoves a man in his 50s from 38, 40, 50 to start being conscious. And that goes back to what we were talking about the resolutions. If you know the dangers of what is ahead, you can't decide to be reckless.
That's for the men. How about the women?
Yeah. Your prostate, you must look after your prostate.
As I was saying, how about the women?
Okay, so I think I would want to focus on just 2 things for the women's health. Of course, it's the heart health and then the hormones. But since we're looking more at gender...
Hormones.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Hormones. So that's more female-focused, okay? Heart health is across board, but hormones are chemicals in the body that produce actions, okay, and that focus on reproductive health. Those are reproductive hormones. So for a woman to produce an egg, an hormone has to be up. For the egg to be released, another hormone has to come out. For her to have her period, a hormone, there's supposed to be a surge and a drop. All that. Women are hormonal creatures. We get angry, there's one hormone running.
Without reason.
No comment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
That's why we need a lot more understanding. Sometimes the hormones are just going
haywire.
Yeah, and then especially when you are in the perimenopause age and menopause age, there's a perimenopause age, that's before menopause. And so those hormones also control infertility. I used to hear people say, yeah, we've done everything and we don't know what's wrong. Like,
okay, there's a message here from a doctor and says, enlarged prostate is mainly caused by a lot of ejaculation, not eating red meat.
Oh.
Is there any connection with red meat?
Well, inflammation can trigger a lot of things. So everything that will cause inflammation, prostatitis and all that, will also dovetail into BPH.
Well, I'm wondering...
And the doctor also says it is prostate, not prostrate.
Of course, people always say prostrate. It is amazing.
It's prostate.
Yes.
Anyway, I have plenty of questions that I can ask today. I have plenty of questions that I cannot ask today because on the one hand, you are saying, okay, in fact, there was a man who went on a TV and was saying, look, the more men ejaculate, the less chances of prostate cancer, and then anyway.
I've heard that too. Any
Dr.
correlation?
Adeniga, we have to go, but any correlation, 30 seconds.
We need data to back that up.
Okay. We need data. Okay.
Is it which telco? Don't answer the question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yonda Agbeniga, CEO and Principal Consultant, Medi Ideas Lifestyle and Wellness Center. I'm glad to know that even in 2025, you're willing to answer our call every time that we make it. Thank you very much. A happy new year to you.
This is the first time she's smiling when you come.
Because you didn't talk about chocolate today. Thank you. And that's Sunrise for today. We're happy that we could bring you a fresh edition in 2025. Well, we hope you enjoyed it. We'll bring you a fresh edition next week. I'm Alero Edu, wishing you all the best until we see again.
Well, innovation, innovation, innovation. More to come on Sunrise. I'm Aya Makinde. Do have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye.